So this is a client case study from my client Rob. And he's someone who went from being completely devastated after a breakup, still totally hung up on his toxic ex who cheated on him, feeling hopeless and lost with no direction in his life, a slave to his vices and addictions, losing all his confidence and having no sense of self-worth, to being completely over his ex, crystal clear on his purpose and his vision for his life and his future, rid of his addictions and vices that were holding him back, and attracting three new high quality women without even trying. And now, just a few short months later, now he's in a happy, healthy relationship with an awesome woman who he chose out of those three once he created that abundance for himself and truly understood his own value and worth as a man. So let's dive a little deeper into how he got here and how he got to where he is now. So when Rob came to me, he felt like a broken man. He had just gone through a breakup and he was completely devastated. He was struggling with sleepless nights, couldn't eat for days due to crippling anxiety and depression. And as a result, he was turning to drugs and alcohol to cope. And as I said, he was still totally hung up on his ex, who was super toxic. And even though she lied to him multiple times and cheated on him, he was still hung up on her. So as a result, his self esteem was in the gutter and he felt hopeless and lost. And the thing about Rob is, before all of this, he was a very motivated and driven guy. But as a result of the breakup, he really felt crushed and he didn't know what was happening to him, right? He'd really lost his identity. And so he fell into an anxiety loop because he just didn't know who he was anymore. And he had really been changed by the breakup. But the thing about Rob that was great is that he had some self awareness. He realized this was not a one off thing, he realized that this was a cycle. And most guys, they go throughout their whole life just reliving these cycles again and again, attracting women with red flags and ignoring them, and then ending up devastated as a result. And that's where Rob was. His confidence was shattered. It was shot. He had lost his identity and he was lacking clarity and direction in his life. And Rob was not just someone who worked a 9 to 5 job either. He was self employed, he was an entrepreneur. So he was responsible for his own income. And that was suffering a lot as a result, right? He was not making the money that he wanted. And he knew something had to change. He knew that if he continued on the path that he was on, things would get even worse. Something needed to change, and it needed to change urgently. But first, before you can change, you have to make a decision, right? And this is where Rob decided that enough was enough. He made a decision to turn his pain into power. Most guys, they'll allow an incident like that to set the course for the rest of their life. They go through a devastating breakup or divorce, and they'll never course correct. But Rob decided to use this pain, the pain of this devastating breakup, as a catalyst for his transformation. He decided to use this pain to set out on his hero's journey and to become the hero of his own story. He was fed up with feeling lost, confused, and hopeless, and he knew that something needed to change. And he also knew, he was smart enough to understand that he couldn't do it on his own. He knew that he needed support. So we're going to go step by step through this process of what took him from where he was to where he is now. But you have to understand that none of that is possible without this. You first have to make this decision to turn this pain into the catalyst for your transformation. So the first step that we had to take Rob through was identifying his patterns. So we identified what his patterns were and where they came from. And in Rob's case, it was picking damaged women and ignoring red flags due to low self-worth because he was starved for love and affection, which ties all the way back to his childhood. And as a result of ignoring these red flags, things would progressively get worse. So in this case, even though he knew that his ex was toxic, he told me that it was the deepest connection he had ever experienced with a woman before. And so he still was very attached to her because of that. And he struggled with a lot of people pleasing tendencies and not feeling comfortable communicating boundaries. And Rob was a charismatic guy. So in the beginning of relationships, he would usually start out very confident and strong and have boundaries. But then he would end up sabotaging himself as the relationship would go on by people pleasing and losing himself in the relationship and not having those healthy boundaries once he felt like the relationship could actually last, because then the stakes were higher. So the next step that's really important, right? Because this is all a story. You have to understand that your life is a story. It's a narrative, right? And we had to understand what the past of his narrative was so that we could create a new future narrative. We had to reauthor the narrative of this story. And so the next step was we had to identify the roots of these patterns and unconscious self-limiting beliefs. And in order to do that, we had to bring what was unconscious into consciousness. So that's what allows us to change the relationship to our past, right? Because without that, then your story is just running you unconsciously. So this is what allowed us to help him to change his relationship to his past and heal his inner child. And once we changed that, we reauthored his story and we assigned new meanings to the events and the experiences, meanings that actually served him and that aligned with who he wanted to be and the life he wanted to create. And this is where we really began rewiring his subconscious mind. But before we could really do that, as part of this process, we had to create clarity and vision for his purpose. Because this is the fundamental thing that, above all else, will be the determining factor. Because ultimately, what you have to understand is that without purpose, without direction, and without clarity of purpose, none of this other stuff can work. So what you see on screen here, this is something called, it's a framework called the logical levels. And this is a framework that I use with all of my clients. And as you can see, purpose is on the top because purpose is the driving factor for everything else in that pyramid. And, a lot of people, they talk about how important environment is, right? They say, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And as you can see, environment is on the bottom of the pyramid. It is important. And there is some truth to that, what people say about that. But actually, the reality is that purpose is the most important factor. Because you could take a Nelson Mandela and you can put him in prison, but he won't become a prisoner because his purpose is greater than that, right? And if you think about anybody that you look up to, anybody that you admire, anybody that you've read about or that you've watched documentaries on, or anybody that you really admire because they've accomplished really big things, all of them, they have this. They have purpose. And we have words for that in terms of, oh, you think these people have these traits and qualities like confidence and charisma. But the reality is what's behind that, what allows those traits and qualities is this, right? So we have to understand that that's the fundamental thing that will drive everything else. And the thing about Rob is that before the relationship and the breakup, he had that. He had that clarity of purpose. He was driven. He was an entrepreneur. He was motivated. But at some point in the relationship, he lost track of that. He lost track of who he wanted to be. He lost track of his identity. He lost track of his values and what values that he wanted to be the guiding light for his life. So we had to reestablish that. We had to connect that, and we had to get him that clarity of purpose before we could do anything else, right? Because he was feeling like he was lost out at sea without an oar and without a destination. And a ship a ship out at sea without a rudder and without a destination will just stay lost at sea. So that's why it's so important to get that purpose and direction. So we had to get crystal clear on exactly who he wanted to be. And not only that, but exactly what his vision was for the life that he wanted to create, right? And what his purpose was. So once we did that, then the next step that was also fundamental is deprogramming his old beliefs about women and about relationships and masculinity. Because in order to install new beliefs, we have to deprogram the old ones. So we had to identify what beliefs were there, what frames, paradigms that he was operating out of from the past that were not aligned with his goals and his desired reality. And Rob, he never struggled with attracting women. That wasn't his problem. But he had a childhood wound from his past about not being desired enough. And so that would cause him to commit too quickly. And if he met a girl that he liked or was even halfway interested in, he would quickly fully committed to that woman. And then that would lead to him becoming needy and seeking approval and eventually losing that woman. So we needed to deprogram those beliefs, and we needed to program new beliefs around this. And so, because it's not enough to deprogram the beliefs, you have to install new beliefs, right, that are actually aligned with your goals, with your desired reality when it comes to this stuff. So we had to build the right and correct understanding of the masculine and feminine dynamics, female psychology, and install the core tenets of masculinity so that he could be operating from those. Because in Rob's case, one of his main blocks was his people pleasing tendencies, right? Not having boundaries and assertiveness when he needed to. And we also needed to help him have boundaries for himself. And that's what allowed him to overcome his addictions and vices. And all of that is what helped him and allowed him to build unshakable inner confidence and self worth. But as I was saying, right, none of that can happen without this. This is the first step. You've got to make this decision to turn that pain into power and allow this to be a catalyst for your transformation. And if you've watched up to this point, then I assume that that resonates with you and you understand that and you've adopted that mindset. But as I said, the next step after that is to establish this clarity and this purpose. This is a massive domino for true change and transformation. Because as I said, in Rob's case, one of the things that was a leak of his masculinity was those people-pleasing behaviors. And that really comes down to a lack of assertiveness and a lack of boundaries. And assertiveness isn't about being an asshole. It's about having standards and boundaries for ourselves. But we can't have those standards and those boundaries unless we have that vision, those values, that identity, and most importantly, that purpose. So the solution is getting clarity on all of that. But what I see time and time again with guys when they don't have that is that it's very difficult to be assertive or to have boundaries or to stand for anything when we don't have that why. And as they say, if we stand for nothing, we'll fall for anything. So again, really fundamental to all this stuff is deprogramming and installing new beliefs and everything we've covered here. But it's really that why that's the thing that will pull guys out of the depths and into another level of power. So if you've watched up to this point and you're post-breakup or divorce right now and you resonate with this story, and just like Rob did, maybe you feel a little bit lost out at sea, understand that purpose is what will guide you back. And that's what will guide you back into your power. So if you're ready to make a decision to turn that pain into power and allow this to propel you on your hero's journey, to become the catalyst for your transformation and become the hero of your own story, so you can create the reality you want and be the man you want to be, then click the link below in the description and jump on a call with me. And I'll take you through an exercise, the same exercise I did with Rob, that'll help you get clarity on exactly where you are and exactly where you want to be, and come up with a step-by-step battle plan to get you there. So if you're ready to make that decision and you're serious about it and you're ready to step into that next level of yourself, that 2.0 version of you, and you want to come out of this and feel confident and feel driven and feel powerful and be seen as such by others, and eventually be able to not only create the life you want, but attract the kind of woman that you want and actually keep the kind of woman you really want, then click the link below and I'll see you on the call.